Hey, I'm Mio Biskin from Creativity Mindset Mastery. Welcome to this free 3-part video series on how to get more time, money, and confidence to do your creative work. So this is the three biggest topics that I hear about when I ask people about how their creative work's going. You know, is it all going to plan? Is it going well? And people generally say, well, I don't have enough time, I don't have enough money, and I don't have enough confidence to really go for it. So I wanted to put together this video series to help you remove these blocks, because if you're an artist, you're probably experiencing 1, 2, or all 3 of these at the moment. And there are a few simple tools and techniques and ways of thinking about these issues that basically help to open up more possibility and opportunity to do your creative work. So if you just think about what's on the other side of those 3 issues, it really is this open field of opportunity where you can tap into doing more of what you love doing. And that's really why I want to do this video series, and why I want to help artists with these issues so that they can get out and just do more of what they love, because we want more awesome artists doing their creative work in the world. So, I should probably tell you a little bit about myself, just so you know what's going on here. My name's Mio Biskin, like I mentioned. I run Creativity Mindset Mastery. As well as that, I am a musician. I've been a musician since I was 11. I got my first guitar when I was 11. Had guitar lessons all through my teens, and then in my early 20s, I started writing songs and playing in bands. I also worked through my 20s full-time as a civil draftsman. So I worked in an office, always wishing that I had more time to do my creative work. So I did that for about 8 or 9 years, and I reached a point where I really desperately wanted to do more of my creative work. And I had a moment sitting at my desk where I had this realization where I thought, if I don't do something soon, I'm probably going to be here in 40 or 50 years in front of this computer, you know, working at this kind of dead-end job that doesn't really satisfy me. So I want to do more music. So I ended up quitting that job and taking the leap. And within about a month, I had left Melbourne, moved to Berlin in Europe, and really pursued my music more than I ever had before. So I'm a singer-songwriter. I really jumped into it full-time and had a steep learning curve on how to be a musician full-time, how to be an artist full-time. And there are many similarities between being a musician and developing that craft, and it's similar to being a visual artist or a dancer or filmmaker, whatever it is. There's a lot of overlap. So what I'm sharing in this video series is going to help you no matter what creative field you come from. Also, no matter where you're at in that journey, because these really are the fundamentals. So, so that's kind of basically that journey. But when I decided to go full-time, I really had to learn a lot of stuff that really no one teaches artists. No one teaches us how to be artists, how to make time, how to structure your time so you're more effective, how to set goals, how to have a plan and stick to it. And for a long time, my creative practice was really random. And you might have experienced the same thing. It's just taking random action and getting random results. So I decided to really figure this out, and I spent a lot of time working on it. And I developed something that has become really helpful for other artists. Once I kind of figured it out, it really unleashed a lot of my own creative potential. I ended up touring all of Europe, making a living from my music, and I ended up getting invited to be on tour with some amazing people, like Gautier, Claire Bowditch, Missy Higgins, and Tommy Emmanuel, they've all been, you know, some kind of mentor or hero to me at some point. Tommy Emmanuel was when I was a teenager learning guitar. He was like, you know, my idol. So to be on tour with him was really like a dream come true, from working full-time in a job that I felt was a dead end to being on tour with Tommy Emmanuel and Gautier was quite phenomenal. So the reason I really tell that story is that no matter where you are in your creative journey, I was probably there. I really struggled with my practice. I struggled to have a consistent daily practice. I struggled to finish projects. I was just all over the map. And it seems to be a very common story for artists. So again, that's why we're here in this video series, to learn how to get more time, money, and confidence to do your work. So the main theme that we'll be talking about throughout this video series is going to be the idea of mindset. So that's why I started this organization called Creativity, Mindset, Mastery. Because ultimately, your success and failure doesn't really rely on your skills, talents, and ability. Your success and failure is going to come down to what's going on between your two temples when you're working on creative stuff. So success as an artist is 80% psychology and 20% mechanics. So getting your mindset right really is more than half the battle of being able to free up your creative energy. So if you think about where you're being held back at the moment with your creative practice, it's really likely that the bottleneck is actually up here in your mind. So we're going to spend a lot of time throughout this video series really kind of digging into that, because I personally believe it is the foundation. It's the fundamentals. If you imagine two different artists, they both have the exact same ability. Just say we're talking about a dancer or an opera singer. They have the exact same ability. They've had the same training, have the same physique. Everything is exactly the same. The only difference is one of them really fully believes in themselves, in their art, in art in general, that their art is a contribution to the world and it's important. And the other person is really doubtful, doubts their own ability. They don't know if they've had the right training or not. They are nervous in front of other people when it comes to performance. So these two people with the exact same ability step up on stage and you have two very different outcomes. And really the difference is psychology. It's mindset. It's what's going on up here. So I hope that illustrates the power of mindset, and we're going to keep coming back to it. So yeah, get used to that idea. So let's talk about time. How do you get more time to do your creative work? So time obviously is a very important element to doing creative work. You need time to do it. All skills are developed through time. You can't really cram developing your skills. So consistency and time are really important in this process. So one of the first places to start when it comes to time is thinking about how you spend time and how other people spend time. What do we tend to spend time on? So if you think about someone who's really dedicated to health and fitness, they will somehow find the time to get up at 5 a.m. and go to the gym before work, and maybe they'll do something after work as well. Where I don't do that. You might be able to tell that, but they do. So same with someone who's become an amazing jazz guitar improviser. They have somehow found the time to do the practice and to do the work to get better and develop. The thing is that every human being on the planet has time in the same quantity. So we all get the same amount of time. Everyone gets 24 hours a day. Doesn't matter if you're a king or an emperor, or if you're whatever you do. You sell biscuits to birds, whatever you do. Everyone gets the same amount of time. So why do some people get things done and other people don't get things done? And it comes down to your time. The time you spend on something will be directly in proportion to how valuable that thing is to you. So this comes down to values and priorities. So someone who's going to the gym at 5, they are placing a really high value on health and fitness and maybe wanting to look good. Someone who's practicing a couple of hours a day, doing jazz, scales and learning chords or whatever, they're putting a really high value on their art and creative expression. So we really want to look at values. If your family is important to you and you value it really highly, then you're probably going to spend time with them on weekends. You're going to think about them when it's their birthday. You're going to, send them presents, things like that. So wherever your values lie in the ladder of values, that's where your attention and focus and energy and time will go. I want you to write down 5 key reasons why your art is important to you and the feeling of doing your art and being in that creative flow state. So I just want you to do that now. I'll just kind of repeat the question a few times. If you want to pause the video, do that. But write down 5 reasons why your art is important and the feeling of that flow state when you're really in that creative space, what that feels like. So just go ahead and do that right now. What we've done there is we've sort of started to elevate the importance of your art practice. So you may say it's really important for you to do it for mental health. You don't feel great when you're not doing it. So maybe it's for that. Maybe it's important because you want to share your message with the world. Maybe you just want to have a venue where you can express yourself in the world. There are really thousands of reasons, and the reasons you have will be unique to you. So it's really important for you to know what they are and to tap into that feeling of what it's like when you're fully engaged in doing it. Because that's another thing that will kind of excite you, and it'll get you to want to prioritize doing it because it reminds you, hey, it actually feels great to do this. I love doing it, so I'm going to make time to do it. So now that we've got that in place, we've kind of elevated the value of your art or putting it higher in your value ladder. We really want to get it up as high as possible, to the top or near the top. So this leads into prioritization. So it's such a corporate, boring word, but I want to introduce it in this context to help you figure out how to get more time to do your creative work. Like we've established, time is going to come from when you value something. So there's a really great framework to help think about this. So it's called the importance versus urgency framework. It's a quadrant. So I'm going to go through the quadrant pretty quickly, and then we'll talk about where art fits into the picture and how to start to get more time to do your creative work. So if you look at the bottom left quadrant, this is low in importance and low in urgency. So this quadrant is full of things that are basically distractions. So this might be just flicking through Instagram or hanging out on Facebook or just messaging with some random friend, watching an entire season of something on Netflix or just binging on watching something. This is really the dimension of distraction. This is really sort of low quality actions in the world. They kind of feel good in the moment, but they don't really leave you feeling very good afterwards. So let's move to the next quadrant, which is in the bottom right, which is high in urgency and low in importance. So this quadrant is normally filled with interruptions. So this is when, you're doing your creative work and someone just interrupts you, or even just having notifications on your phone going off all the time, interrupting you, or someone calls you out of the blue and says, hey, I'm just up the street. Do you want to go for a cup of coffee? And you're just like, oh, okay, well, kind of feel like I need to do this now. It's quite urgent. So yeah, okay, I'll do that. And you end up sort of just giving away a lot of your time through interruptions. The next quadrant is in the top right-hand corner. This is critical activities or emergencies. So you'll notice it's high in importance and high in urgency. This is basically the ultimate motivator. Humans respond to things that are high in importance and high in urgency. So this is things like if someone calls you and they're really, really very ill and they need you to take them to the hospital. Or you're skiing and you break both of your legs. Suddenly that becomes the absolute highest priority. Everything else kind of disappears, and that's something you need to tend to. So that's very motivating. So the other things that fall into this category are deadlines. So deadlines that haven't been tended to, they work their way into this quadrant. And a way to overcome that is just through some simple planning and making sure you're doing things ahead of time so that you don't end up in this quadrant. Then the final quadrant, this is really the key and the crux of prioritization and what we want to focus on. This is something that's high in importance and low in urgency. So because it's low in urgency, we tend to not focus our energy and time on it. But if it's high in importance, then we know it's going to give us value long term. It's something that we're going to enjoy over time. So really all of the critical things in your life that bring you fulfillment will come from this quadrant. So this is going to be things like your health and fitness, so that you don't end up having any issues where you end up in the critical quadrant, critical activity quadrant, like if you get really sick. So to avoid getting really sick, we want to do things in the important quadrant, which is not urgent. So that's things like just eating well and regular exercise. So it also relates to your art. If you think about the core skills in your art practice, they will fall into this quadrant. So this is going to be skills that you're developing. So if you're a singer, this quadrant is going to be all about singing practice. This is really the quadrant of practice and development. So it could be singing, songwriting, writing if you're a writer, stretching and practicing if you're a dancer. This is the core of your creative practice, and this is the thing that you want to focus most on, and this is the thing that you want to fill your calendar with. You want to fill your weekly planner with activities from this quadrant. So that might be health, fitness stuff, but we're going to focus on creative work. So why do people struggle to do what's in that quadrant? So it's really easy to do things that are in the distraction quadrant because they kind of feel good short term. So things in that upper quadrant, so I'm going to call it quadrant 1 or your art quadrant. Things are challenging to do because they're not urgent. So as artists, we generally don't have someone looking over our shoulder saying, hey, how's that painting going? I need that done by Wednesday. And hey, you've got an exhibition coming up in 3 months. You really better get a move on with these paintings. So these things are inherently challenging to do. The way that we go about getting them done is a few things. So we have to know what we're doing throughout the week. We have to know what type of activity we are doing and where it fits in the quadrant. So one exercise for you to do is to print out the weekly planner that I have for you on this page. You can download it and print out a couple of copies of that. And in the first exercise, I want you to look back at your week that has just gone, and as best as you can, map out exactly how you spent your time. So if you spent some time at work or school, you spent some time with family, you spent some time just on the couch watching Netflix or whatever, you spent some time traveling, across town, whatever. Try and map it out as best as you can. And then the second part of the exercise is to work out where each activity lies in the quadrant. And you can plot it out in the quadrant as well. You can just draw that up. So if it was, I spent 3 hours watching stuff on Netflix the other day, then you can have a look at the quadrant and go, okay, well, that wasn't super important and it wasn't very urgent either. So it's going to go in the distraction quadrant. Go through and do that with each little activity that you did through the week, and then add up just how much time you spent in each quadrant. This exercise is not about judging yourself harshly or feeling bad about how you're spending time. It's really just to get an objective look at, okay, I see how I'm spending my time, and now I'm going to be able to make better choices so that I can start spending my time a bit wiser. So add up how much time you've spent there, and then work out a rough percentage of how much time you spent in each quadrant. So the key number of how much time you want to be spending in that art zone quadrant in the top left, high in importance, low in urgency, the number is about 70%. So that's pretty high, but around 70%. So 60 to 80%, this is kind of that's like the bullseye. That's kind of what you're aiming for. So at the moment, if it's 2% or 5%, that's okay. You can just kind of work towards building up that amount of time that you spend doing long-term fulfilling activities like your art. So once you've done that, that will give you just an idea of where you're at. And that will help you to also start putting in strategies to basically start to remove the time you're spending in all the quadrants other than quadrant 1 and spend more time in quadrant 1. So if you have some patterns of distracting behavior, like you just get stuck on Instagram, like it just happens every day and you're there for 30 minutes or an hour. And that happens. I know. I've been there. It's okay. So now it's about making a conscious choice and saying, okay, that's actually quite a distracting behavior. And if I freed up that time throughout the week, I could potentially free up 2 hours, 3 hours, 5 hours, and move that time into doing creative work. So this is one method where we're already starting to free up time. So it's not about really making more time, because there is no more time. It's 24 hours. So it's about arranging our value system so that it can affect how we're spending our time. So you can do the same with the other quadrants. Just notice what the time-wasting behavior is, and then come up with a strategy for how you're going to deal with that in the future. So if it's Instagram and you love Instagram, but you find you get stuck on it and it's a bit of a trap, you can just set some limits for yourself. So you can say, okay, I'm going to spend 10 minutes or 20 minutes on it a day, and I'm going to set a timer, and when that time's up, I'm just going to shut my phone down and put it on the other side of the room, something like that. But this at least starts to empower you to be able to start making better choices. Okay, so now we've been through this process of elevating the importance of our art, getting an objective look at how we're spending time. The next exercise is to, once you've mapped out last week, is to get out another weekly planner. And as you're going through this week and as you're going through this video series, just continue to track how you're spending your time. So again, no judgment around it. You're just, if something's happening and you just catch yourself like, oh wow, I was just scrolling for an hour, you're just going to write that down and move on. And you'll notice that it may start to affect your decisions as you go through the week, and you'll start to kind of tighten things up. And you'll find that you are already getting more time to do your art, which is the aim of this video. So that's the next exercise, is to just keep that handy and just track how you're spending time. So now we're going to move into the next part of it, which is how do you now take this information, because I know this is still kind of a bit conceptual. How do you take that and practically use it to leverage way more time out of your week? So the best way to do this is this idea. It's called the big rocks time management. So the idea is that if you have an empty jar and you have a tray that has a couple of big rocks, a few medium rocks, and then some, sand, if you put the sand in first and then you put the medium rocks in, you won't have any room for the big rocks. Now, in this example, the big rocks is everything that's in quadrant 1, the art zone. This is where you want to be spending most of your time. So these are big and important things that you want in your week. But if you fill it up with all kinds of other just random stuff and distraction, you end up not having room for it. So what we want to do is we want to do it the other way around. So you want to put in the big rocks first, and then when you put the medium rocks in, they will find some spaces in and around the big rocks. And then you put the sand in, and the sand will find space in and around the big rocks and the medium rocks. And then you can fit everything into your week, and it feels good. Feels like you're getting important things done, but you're still having a balance of being, a bit distracted. This exercise is really just about figuring out how much time you're spending there now and moving it to the art zone. So we use the exact same approach with planning your week. So generally the way people plan their week when it comes to doing their art is firstly, they probably just don't plan their week. And this is something I never used to do. And I would just kind of hope that I'd have time to do my creative work but basically that's not a great strategy, and I would just never end up doing my work. So you have to kind of become a bit more conscious about how you're spending your week and consciously creating how you want it to go. So this is the process. So you get that weekly planner out, and the first rock, the first big rock is certain fundamental needs and prior commitments. So this is the first rock, needs and prior commitment. Some of the needs are really fundamental, simple things like sleep and food, eating. So you'll map out, when your general sleep times are, and even, ideal sleep times. So maybe you want to kind of be going to bed at 9 and getting up at 6 or 7. So that goes in first, and meal times. So just block out some time. And then there are also prior commitments. So if you work, you're going to put that in there. If you go to uni or school, you're going to put that in there. And that's going to take up, quite a bit of your week, depending on how much you work. In the example, I'm going to use, it's going to be, someone that's working part-time, 3 days a week. So this is an example. I know it's not going to encompass everybody, but it's kind of a bit of a midway point. So maybe you're working full-time and you mostly have the weekends and evenings to do stuff. That's okay. Maybe you're not working, or you're a student. You just at school, 10, 20 hours a week. I'm not really sure. So hopefully this example is a bit of a midway point. So if you see any flaws in it, just correct that in your own working of this example. But the example will work for you anyway. So you block in your prior commitments. You put that stuff in. So that's the first rock. Now, because we have identified as our art as being really important and prioritizing it is really important, the next rock that we're going to put in is potential creative time. So basically the way I do this is any time between 9 a.m. and 10 p.m., I'm going to get a highlighter and I'm just going to highlight that entire space. And so that'll obviously go over, meal times and things like that. But everything else becomes potential creative time. So it doesn't mean you're going to use all of that time, but it's really important to start with this viewpoint that, okay, I have all of this potential creative time. So I want you to do that now. Just highlight all of those areas. Once you've done that, count up each square, or each rectangle, each hour. So you may end up having a few hours Monday, 10 hours Tuesday and Thursday, a bit of time Sunday. Now you've done that, I want you to count up how many hours are there. And just keep in mind, this is potential creative time. So you may have between 5 and 20 hours, could be more, could be 30, 40 hours of potential creative time. The next thing I want you to do is on each of those days, I want you to knock a few hours off that potential creative time, because I know you're a human being and you've got life admin to do, you've got washing to do, you may have kids, you may be traveling a lot to and from places. There are lots of reasons why we can't just have all creative time. So I want to make this a realistic example, but I want us to push it to the optimistic side to know that there's actually lots of creative time if we want it. So knock a couple of hours off each of those days, maybe 1 to 2 hours, and then again go through and add up how many hours are left. So now when you look at this, hopefully what has happened is you have found at least 5 hours. That's like a minimum. I can't imagine anyone not being able to find 5 hours if the second thing they are prioritizing is their work, just behind, family, work obligations, and potentially other hobbies. Maybe you do yoga on a Wednesday night and, you have a family lunch every Sunday. But in and around that, there's going to be a load of time that's not being utilized very well at the moment. And you're going to have a magic number. So that magic number is going to tell you, okay, I actually have, 10 hours of potential creative time. So once you have that, high five. Once you have that, we're almost there. So the next question you want to ask yourself is, if I was focused, what could I get done in this amount of creative time? So if I was focused on my creative projects, what could I really accomplish this week with this amount of creative time? So I'm going to use the example of 10 hours. If it's 10 hours that you were able to salvage, then within 10 hours as a songwriter, if a song takes a couple of hours to write, I could probably write 3 or 4 new songs in a week. And if I were to write 3 or 4 new songs each week, I'd start to have quite a backpack full of really good songs very quickly. So if you're a painter, you may be able to get a painting done a week. If you're a writer, you may be able to get 10,000 words written. That's definitely nothing to sneeze at. It's really substantive. And I hope that from going through this exercise, you're getting a bit of a sense for what's actually possible if you go through this simple exercise of raising the value of your art, prioritizing it in a new way, and then mapping it out in a visual form to see exactly how much time you have each week. And then once you know that magic number, you can make a really intelligent decision as to, okay, I know I have 10 hours. What's the best way for me to spend this time? And the next step is to really decide what you want that outcome to be, and then commit to doing that week. So after I've done that, I basically schedule in when I'm going to do my creative time, and I come up with a commitment for the week. So it might be, okay, I'm going to write 3 songs this week. So I hope that was super helpful. This process seems pretty simple, but I really want to implore you to print out the worksheets below, really use them, go through this process. The only way you're going to know if this works for you is to actually go through and do it. So I never used to do this sort of stuff, and I would just waste all of my time and feel like I had no time. But like I said, this is all about mindset. So hopefully something has shifted inside your mind where you're not thinking anymore, I don't have time to do my creative work. Hopefully now you're feeling really hopeful and optimistic, saying, wow, I actually have a lot of time to do my creative work. I have a lot more than I thought. And that's a really exciting thought that opens up so much possibility. And like I said, this video series is really about opening more possibility so that you feel like you can really move forward in your creative practice. And I hope that's where you're feeling right now. If you're not for some reason and you want to ask me some questions or have any comments about this process or anything, please leave them in the comments below. I'm going to be down there, hanging out and trying to be as helpful as I can. I really, gone to some effort to set this video up and make some resources. I genuinely want to help you. So if I have the opportunity to do so, please use my availability and ask me questions. I'll be there to help you. So please do that. Another thing before we sign off is I would love to ask you a favor of sharing this video series with a friend or two who you know would benefit from this. When it comes to time, money, and confidence, that's pretty much every artist everyone kind of needs some help with this. So I would really appreciate it if you got value from this to please do me a small favor and just let a few people know. So whether you do it through Facebook or you send them an email, send them the link in the navigation bar, or maybe I've got a link somewhere here you can check out, copy and paste to them. I would really appreciate that. It costs you very little to do that, and it's a huge benefit to me, so I would appreciate it. Apart from that, I just want to implore you one more time to please print out the exercises and go through and do that. And in the comments below, I would love for you to tell me how many hours you thought you had before you did this exercise, and then how many hours it actually freed up for you. I'd be really curious to find out what that is. So please do that. Apart from that, I'm going to send out another video in the next couple of days. It's going to be like this. It's going to be pretty informal and in-depth. And it's going to be all about the whole money question. So artists really hold back on creative projects because they have this thought in their mind that says, I don't have the money to do that project. And it can be really stifling. So if you're experiencing that, or you've ever experienced that before, I'm going to go through a series again of kind of mindset shifts and new perspectives that's going to remove and dissolve this block, the whole money question. And it again will kind of open up another field of opportunity for you to do your creative work. And that's really exciting. So keep an eye out in your email, or even in your junk email over the next few days, and that's going to come your way. And that's about it. So if you've watched this far and you've done the exercises, you're going to see a huge improvement in your creative practice. So I'm excited for you. Thanks so much for checking this out, and I really look forward to sharing more in the next video. Until then, your art matters. So go and create.